Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us here tonight. My name is David Almonte, and I'm one of the co-founders of FountainHead Rhode Island. I want to welcome all of you joining us here on the Zoom call this evening, along with those who are joining us via our Facebook page. All of us here at FountainHead, as well as our incredible lineup of speakers here tonight, are very excited to be here with you as we kick off our first official panel of 2020. Before we get into the panel itself, I just want to take a moment and give you a brief overview of FountainHead Rhode Island and who we are. The goal of FountainHead Rhode Island is to connect like-minded individuals with diverse backgrounds that share a similar passion, vision, and ambition for moving Rhode Island forward. Now, in saying that, we're a community approaching 1,000 individuals in terms of size, with both national and international reach, based on the experience and connections of our incredible members. We're also a not-for-profit 501c3 for those wondering about that as well. We accomplish our goal by hosting panel events throughout the year on various educational topics, such as financial literacy, sustainability, art and culture, technology, among many other topics. All of our panels have a networking component to them, as connecting people is at the core of who we are and what we do here at FountainHead. And we're not about to let a pandemic stand in our way of bringing our community together for a higher purpose. Throughout the year, we also spotlight individuals and organizations in the community doing really big things. And we're proud as of today to have shared over 40 spotlights in just over 3 years that we've been an organization. If not done so already, please be sure to follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram at FountainHead RI. Also be sure to visit our website, www.fountainheadri.org, and subscribe to our email list. Social media, our website, and email list are the best ways to keep in touch with what we're doing and where you can find us throughout the year. We're hoping that you're all staying well, staying safe during these uncertain times. And again, thank you for joining us here tonight. I'll turn it over to Jason Dodier, one of my fellow co-founders, for a few last-minute items before we jump into the panel. Jason, all yours.
Thank you very much, David. And again, echoing David's sentiments, I wish we could all be together. I wish you health, wellness, and hopefully at some point this year, early next year, we're back in the old panel sessions in person as we used to do. Today, I have the good privilege, first and foremost, of thanking our sponsors, the Daily Note and Insperity, for all you've done to support our community this year and making these events possible. Now, to begin, as you can see, we have some highly esteemed panelists that have joined us for our first ever virtual panel. I will do a brief introduction and then I will turn it over to our moderator to begin the session. I'd like to start. Our moderator is Tien Wang. Tien is a tech entrepreneur, CEO, and angel investor. He's chairman and CEO of Opus 8, which is a private investment and strategic advisory firm. And he's also created the Big Idea Connectpreneur Forum. It's a community of over 16,000 founders, CEOs, and angels, VCs. In addition to join Tien on the panel, the first panelist is somebody, for those of you from Rhode Island that are on the call, you may recognize Rajiv Kumar. He's the Chief Medical Officer and President of Virgin Pulse Institute, providing Virgin Pulse clients with cutting-edge value on investment studies and promoting research on health. And prior to that, Dr. Kumar's company was acquired, his company Shape Up, by Virgin Pulse in 2016. In addition, Kathy Miley joins us. She's a global expert and leader in cybersecurity. She's got over 25 years of experience in the IT space. And prior to being the CXO at the Cybersecurity Collaborative, she was the Chief Operating Officer and Acting Chief Information Security Officer at Cybrary. Thank you for joining us, Kathy. And last but certainly not least, from my alma mater, Dr. Ricardo Ernst. Dr. Ernst is the Barada Chair in Global Business. He's a professor of operations and global logistics and the former Deputy Dean of the McDonough School of Business at Georgetown University. So again, on behalf of all of us, thank you for joining. To the audience, please enjoy the session, be interactive, prepare some questions, because you have the right people that will help guide us through these very uncertain times. And with that, Tien, over to you.
Thank you so much, Jason. I'd like to welcome everybody for joining. It's so good to see lots of familiar faces. We have people in from California and around the East Coast. So welcome. And I also want to thank the Fountainhead Rhode Island folks, especially David and Jason, and congratulate them on all the great things you guys are doing to educate and bring community together. Today we have a very phenomenal panel. We have expertise ranging from cybersecurity to digital health to supply chain, international, capital, etc. And the topic is extremely fitting today, as you guys know, tech and uncertainty. I do want to say that we will have audience Q&A. So as you know, on Zoom, you can just click the chat button below and you can enter your questions anytime you'd like. If you have a specific person that you'd like to address the question to, you can put it right in there, and we'll try to get to all the questions. We'll try to get to as many as we can. You can also feel free to enter the questions anytime you would like. And I'll bring that up in a half an hour or so as well. I'd like the three panelists to kick things off by introducing themselves and giving sort of a high level, obviously a little bit more background, and a high level assessment of the situation that we have here from whatever lens you prefer to do. And we'll go in alphabetical order this time. We'll start with Professor Ernst, and then go to Dr. Kumar, and then Ms. Miley. So Dr. or Professor.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm glad to be here and share some ideas with you. My area of expertise is global supply chains. And as you can imagine, as you have heard, supply chains are probably the most important thing that connects the world. People are arguing that globalization is stopping. I would argue that's the opposite. The world is every day more interconnected and more interrelated. And the best proof of that has been the pandemic. I mean, the pandemic is all over the world. So it's a good indication that the world is interconnected. My area of expertise is supply chain. So how are the supply chains reacting? How are the supply chains actually using the most important word these days, which is resilience? How do you create a resilient supply chain? That's something that we're going to be talking about, I hope. And then that is basically what I've been doing lately is talking and helping organizations, companies to better accommodate the best way of dealing with these resilient times. Just to give you a preview of the movie, the companies have been better prepared than you think. And that is why for many of us, even though it has changed significantly our personal lives, but the businesses continues to operate. I'm talking business, global business, not necessarily restaurants and bars and so on and so forth. I'm talking about the big companies. Big companies have been very, very good, and hopefully we're going to be touching on any and every of those issues. So I have overall, I try to be very optimistic. So I want to give not the negative, not talk about the end of the world that we're going to be dying tomorrow. Actually, all the opposite. I want to see this as an opportunity for learning and moving forward.
Thank you so much, Ricardo. Dr. Kumar?
Hi, everybody. Rajiv Kumar. I am the Chief Medical Officer at Virgin Pulse. For those of you who are Rhode Islanders, you may have heard Virgin Pulse. We are one of the larger and growing companies here in the state. We are basically a health and well-being platform that's global. It's delivered through large employers to reach their employees. And basically our job is to try to help support people in their holistic well-being, whether it's physical, mental, financial, professional, and social well-being. I've been in this digital health space for about 15 years. I started a company while I was in medical school at Brown called Shape Up, and that company got acquired 10 years later by Virgin Pulse. So I've been in this space for quite some time, and I've also been a prolific angel investor in the digital health arena. So I've looked at a lot of different solutions for how do we help people stay healthy, how do we help people who are sick get back to good health, and how do we use technology tools to do that. I think my area of interest right now during this coronavirus epidemic really is centered around the human experience. And what we know is that every single person in the world is waking up every single morning thinking about their own personal health and well-being and the health and well-being of their family, right? It's something we're talking about all the time. In some cases, for some people, for the first time. And what I've seen is, while there's a great tragedy unfolding and we've got millions of people that have been infected with the virus, really everybody is affected in some way. We're all suffering. We're suffering from a mental health perspective with anxiety and depression and social isolation. We're suffering from a physical health perspective, many of us having trouble being physically active, and people having ergonomic issues as they sit at home and work from home maybe for the first time. And then also a lot of financial hardships as well, and financial well-being is really being impacted. So I'm interested in how digital health can really tackle some of these big problems that really the entire world is facing collectively at the same time.
Terrific. I look forward to some further depth on that, Rajiv. Kathy Miley?
Thank you. So I am the Chief Experience Officer with the Cybersecurity Collaborative, and I have been in IT for 30 years now, and 20 years of that has been dedicated to cybersecurity. So the doom and gloom is going to come from me, Ricardo, so no worries there. And so from a cyber perspective, in the interconnected world that Ricardo was talking about, and especially from a personal perspective on the medical and health record side, cybersecurity is something that we all have to begin taking a personal responsibility for. And it's my passion and my duty as a cyber professional to help people understand how they can contribute to securing not only their own personal information, but those in the supply chain that are interconnected and driving the commerce that is global and keeping our world running now. And it's certainly also keeping our hospitals going and our medical system going so that we can continue to deliver wonderful healthcare to citizens around the world. And so our organization, Cybersecurity Collaborative, is not unlike FountainHead in that we bring together cyber leaders in a collaboration effort to try to solve many of these threats that we're seeing from around the world and the bad guys, because cyber leaders are kind of alone. You know, they're the one person in the company who's supposed to know everything about cyber, and that's simply impossible. So the way to tackle the problem with cyber is just like what we're doing here today, sitting together, talking about issues, collaborating through solutions, understanding the problems, and then just moving forward and tackling them as they come.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Kathy. And I'd like to start the conversation with you, actually for you and Rajiv and Ricardo, but you first. You know, COVID has brought a lot of changes, and it's affected us in the business and personal context, health context, as Rajiv said. It's also enhanced or exacerbated the digital divide. The haves are winning and the have-nots are losing. What are your guys' thoughts on how we could enhance access, digital equity to bridge the digital divide and make things a little more equitable?
So from a cyber perspective, it really is that cyber you have to make the digital world a safe place to be. And so you can't put your business out there and put it at risk. So you need to understand all of the threat vectors that you're facing and then build a resilient technology infrastructure that is able to withstand not only the use of that technology and the application of the business that you're in, but also to make sure that the bad guys can't get in, steal data, interrupt services, and cause chaos in the world. So from making technology more applicable in business execution, I think Rajiv is probably living that on a day-to-day basis, and I defer to him on that.
Rajiv?
Yeah, sure. I think, obviously I look at this from a healthcare lens, because it's a world I live in. And I think for healthcare, the challenge is twofold, right? One is we have to bridge this digital divide, but we also have to bridge the health literacy gap. And these, those two things are very intertwined. Folks that have low health literacy are much less likely to engage in digital health solutions or use digital tools to manage their health. And so, there's a number of organizations that have put forward suggestions for how do we solve for this. And there's one organization called Showmark Research that's written a lot about it, and they had some ideas I think are pretty interesting. One is to really think about digital technology and digital health as an entry point. We often assume in medicine that if somebody's using a digital tool for the first time, that they already know how to use it and they already have high levels of health literacy. But I think when somebody first starts using a digital tool, we can sort of use that as an opportunity to teach them, to really kind of make things less complicated, reduce barriers to entry, and onboard them in a way where you're teaching them skills. I think we also have to be proactive in how we tailor digital health interventions for different types of people. I mean, I use a lot of digital health interventions, and none of them ever ask me for my level of health literacy or proficiency. But we could be giving people a choice. Do you want the basic level, the intermediate level, the expert level of content, education, so forth, and really kind of meet people where they're at. I think that would be a huge improvement in a lot of digital health solutions. One of the things that we like to talk about is, when people use health solutions in healthcare, they're often at a point in their life where they're at their worst. They're stressed out. They've got a lot going on. So you have to sort of design these solutions for people at their worst. And I think that really means making them simple and lowering the cognitive load. For example, there's an app called Text for Baby, and it's sort of like a pregnancy management app. And they really rely primarily on SMS. They've got this really robust app and all these other tools, but they figured out they could do almost everything they need to do through text messaging, and that's really the lowest common denominator. It makes it really accessible for everybody. And then I think there's lots of new technologies coming out with IVR and AI assistants and so forth that can make this type of technology available and accessible to people who can't read, people who can't write, people who have other barriers. So I think it's really about focusing on simplicity, thinking about all the different people that we want to get on board, not treating everybody as having the same level of baseline health literacy. And then I also think we just need to realize that some places we don't need technology and digital tools, and we may be using them as a crutch. So wherever we can use human intervention, sometimes that's actually preferable than just pushing everybody to digital capabilities.
That's refreshing to hear that last comment, Rajiv, because it is, at the end of the day, it's all about people to people, I think, right? And technology is just a facilitator. But Ricardo?
I would say that in my world, in the supply chain, digital technology and the digital space is a tool. So because it is a tool, it's a qualifier. I mean, we cannot allow people not to know about it. I mean, there is a minimum level of knowledge that you're required. And if you don't qualify, then very simply, you're out. So some people have a better access, better knowledge, and then you can outsource all that. And then it all gets into the picture, the things that Kathy was talking, to what extent you cover. But in supply chains, you move basically three things. You move information, which is the most important one, the one that you have to protect the most. You move money, which is another one that you need to protect, and you move products. So, at the end of the day, for us, it's a tool. So we don't make this important differentiation, how much you know, how much you don't know. But we do argue that the companies that are ahead in the game, the companies that are more knowledgeable, then they get into the business analytics, how to use technology to actually make intelligence out of the data, then they are ahead of the game. But there is a minimum level, a qualifying level, over which if you don't pass that qualification, that threshold, then you're out of the game.
Great. So I have the next kind of topic I'd like to explore is internationalization, globalization. For each of your three respective disciplines, I'd like to start with Ricardo because Ricardo, in your opening remarks, you talked about how large companies are in quote unquote good shape. We've been reading all the stuff in The Economist and the Wall Street Journal about how companies that were single threaded in, say, China are now scrambling to find alternative places to manufacture and distribute. Can you comment on what you see as sort of a longer term, what's your prediction for the long term? Political stuff aside, although it's hard to put that aside, but
let's not politicize the issue, even though it's important, the tariffs and all that kind of stuff. Sure. But when you talk about globalization, I mean, the definition can be very wide and very ample, so we're not going to get into that. But there are two particular trends regarding globalization. One is people saying deglobalization, that you're becoming less and less global, and then because protection, and then we're going to be self-sufficient, and then you don't need to go and cross barriers, and China this and China that, and then I don't follow that. I think that more important is what I call re-globalization. It's another way of looking at the globalization and how to take advantage of that. Globalization is here to stay. Globalization cannot be stopped. And the main reason is that, everything is interconnected. Let me give you one very simple example so you understand what I'm talking about. A single cup of Starbucks. Starbucks, everybody knows Starbucks. How many of you like Starbucks? All of you like Starbucks. One cup, there you go. And I'm sure that all in the audience are going, yeah. But, out of the one cup of Starbucks, one single cup of Starbucks is touched by from 17 to 19 different countries. So you tell me that we're going to stop that? You see what I'm saying? 19 countries are involved in that. Now, it's very simple. I don't want to push too hard, but just think about yourself. All the things that you have on you, from your shirt to your shoes, to your pants, to your computer, to your phone, you know how many countries are involved in any one of those products? So to think that globalization is going to disappear is out of the question. Now, what is happening is a re-globalization. It's a redefinition of what globalization is all about. And then companies talking about China, yes, it has been a hurdle in the sense that I might not go to China and get what I want immediately, but all these companies, all these big companies, from Cisco to Hewlett-Packard to Unilever to Colgate, they have scenarios for supply chain. And believe it or not, and that's the biggest surprise, in their scenario evaluation, pandemic is one of those. And then when they have talked about pandemic, they know, okay, what do we do if a pandemic were to appear? Well, that happened. And actually, they are very happily surprised that they were able to respond because these companies have been doing that for a long time. What they have been doing for a long time? Planning ahead. Because supply chain is something that is not like a switch on off. You have a long-term investment. The reaction is slow. And therefore, when you say that China is true, it's a shock because they were one of the biggest providers of many things, but they're very good. They're very good at finding alternatives. So overall, I'm optimistic because as you can see, things continue to move and things continue to be reachable, and you all get the products you want. Just call Amazon and you get whatever you want.
Fantastic, thank you. Rajiv, how about the globalization impact on your business? I know you guys are internationally owned and you have a global footprint.
Yeah, no, it's a huge topic. As I mentioned at the top, we serve a lot of U.S.-based employers, but those employers have employees all around the world, right? So most of the Fortune 500, or to Ricardo's point, they're multinational companies. They've got operations everywhere because their businesses are so globalized. So we're always tasked with this problem of how do we take something that we build in the U.S. and make it relevant and accessible for people all around the world. And we've learned a lot, I would say, over the years about cultural relevancy and cultural tailoring. We can't just translate something into 20 languages using Google Translate and assume that it's gonna work for everybody. So we've learned, that you really have to make all of the content local. It has to feel like it was created by the same people that it's being used by. And so we look at everything from what are the religions? How do people eat? And we can't make the same dietary recommendations to everybody. What are the types of physical activity that people like to do? And then there's a lot of rules and regulations that we have to follow globally as well. From a data privacy and protection standpoint with GDPR, countries like Russia have their own rules about where data is stored. China's got their own rules about data. In the country of France, you can't ask somebody on a website how much they weigh. So you can't collect their weight information. There's all kinds of these sort of like nuances that you have to learn about and to deal with. And so, it's really a learning exercise. I would say we've got a lot of battle scars. I'll give you just a couple examples. We put out a whole marketing campaign for employees in the Middle East, and we just used the same marketing materials that we had used in the US. And it had a bunch of people doing yoga, and it had a bunch of women wearing kind of like tank tops doing yoga. And we distributed that to the population in the Middle East, and they were very offended by that, right? And so, we very quickly realized that, you gotta think about each of these populations. We learned that in some of the East Asian countries, people were more responsive to messages when they came from physicians or from authority figures as opposed to, their colleagues and so forth. So it's really a challenge, but it's something that's happening rapidly, and I think companies are really realizing they can't just focus on the U.S. With rising healthcare costs. They have to think about productivity and team cohesion and camaraderie worldwide, and well-being such a global problem that it really has to be tackled everywhere.
Got it. Thank you. Kathy, Rajiv mentioned data security. We've heard about Huawei. We've heard about TikTok. What are your thoughts on those two situations, as well as just in general, the impact of our situation now on the globalization of cybersecurity issues?
So in looking at cybersecurity, it's broken up into different categories, and there's the issue of privacy, right? So keeping the data that resides in these organizations confidential. We recently run into some big issues here in the United States with the EU striking down a framework called a Privacy Shield. And Privacy Shield was put up by the US government to ensure proper handling of EU citizen data. But the EU found that it wasn't sufficient because of the US authority access into US companies, and the companies that are holding that EU citizen data, they found that it was a violation to the citizens' rights. So we're having to think about everything on a country to country basis, and how do we handle that information? So whether it's patient information or employee information, cybersecurity, it really has to look at what are the laws in every single country on handling of that data, whether it can be transferred or touched from the United States, because in some cases, even if we're sitting here talking on a collaboration tool like this, things that we talk about or things that we transfer as documents in this could be considered a violation of those policies. So it's really, or those laws rather. So it's really important that the people within the organizations understand that there is this impact to the globalization and the entering into markets, and whether or not really legally can you operate a business from the United States and access specific data in various countries. But privacy aside, there's also the challenge of we need to protect the operations of the business, right? So it's not just about privacy, it's about making sure that the software applications, mobile applications that people are using to get the services from companies is done in a way that is safe for information. So you as a person who is using a medical application, for example, if I'm talking to my doctor online, the last thing I want to have happen is for a hacker to get in the middle of that conversation, intercept the information that we're talking about and use it for identity theft or for blackmail or whatever it may be. So from a cybersecurity perspective, it's really important to make sure that those applications are very secure. But not just the applications, it's the underlying network, right? So, because there's different ways that hackers can get in. So it's a huge job. Cybersecurity is an enabler to the global business, right? We aren't the business. We are an enabler to make sure that the business can sustain itself. The challenge that we find is that in the at the upper echelons, the boards in the C-levels, there's a real big lack of understanding of the true threats, impacts, and necessity to invest in the needs that for cybersecurity. So application privacy and network.
Got it. Well, we have a couple of audience questions trickling in, so maybe we can address some of these questions. Chris?
Yeah, so Kathy, we just want to stick with you. We have a couple of questions come in. We figure we're a half hour in. We'll take a quick break and bring some folks in. A pretty open-ended question. You were just talking about how cybersecurity is such a huge job. We have a question from one of the attendees about what are people doing to get more people to enter this field? So it's a question related to talent. Is that a problem in the cybersecurity world? What do you see?
Well, it is a huge problem. So right now in the world, there are 3 million open cybersecurity positions. So 3 million jobs ready to be filled, and we don't have the talent to fill it. And so what is the root cause of that? The root cause is that we don't have the interest level to enter into the market. And we find that the big cause to be from the diversity population, right? So cybersecurity has a very low diversity rate in it. And so we need to do a better job across the board in early in schools of educating and teaching cybersecurity as a practice. There's still not an MBA program that I'm aware of that requires a single cybersecurity course. So the people who are running the companies and the people who are running the programs and running the school districts and running everything don't have that familiarity, and we need to take a step back and address that. But what we need to also do is make cybersecurity learning available to people who can't necessarily afford it. And Cybrary, the company that I worked for before this, provides free training to anyone globally. So cybersecurity based training. So that's a place where employers can go and look for qualified candidates who might not fit a traditional job requirement of 5 years, but they may have the aptitude and the ability to perform the duty. So we do a really bad job at teaching people in schools. We do a very bad job of making entering into the market attractive to a broader group of people. And then we do a really bad job of writing job descriptions to help people enter into the industry. That's all got to change.
That's great. And Kathy, we have a couple more cybersecurity questions for you that we'll get to towards the end. But this one, I think it's good for the whole panel, and we could probably start with Rajiv on it. Matt Linehan has a question. There's been a recent push to own your own data. and you're especially seeing this happen in the healthcare industry, where medical records are transferring to a digital format. How is the healthcare industry responding to this change, and to what extent does it pose a cybersecurity threat?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Andrew Yang, who ran in the Democratic primary. He's a personal friend of mine, and this is a topic he talked a lot about, that we should really own our own data. We should have the right to say how it's used. We should have a lot of the same rights that people in Europe now have under GDPR, where we have the right to take the data with us. We have the right to be forgotten and have the data erased, and we have the right to know exactly how it's being used. And then, Andrew Yang goes one step further and says we should have the right to monetize the data. And if anybody else is monetizing it on our behalf, we should get paid for that. And I think that's absolutely right, because our data is being monetized, it is being used, and a lot of people are making a lot of money off that data, and we're none the wiser about it. So I would say that the healthcare industry is waking up to this issue. I think it's way behind where it needs to be. I don't think it's taking any type of really robust action. I think it's definitely a topic of conversation on Capitol Hill. I think candidates are talking about it. I wouldn't be surprised to see it adopted in the Democratic Party platform or in some policy positions going forward, and maybe on all party platforms. But I would say the health industry is way behind and needs to wake up, because people are rising up and really concerned and really kind of upset about how their data is being used. And I'm sure Kathy can talk more about the cybersecurity aspect to it.
Yes. So you are absolutely correct. Companies are monetizing our data, but so are the criminals, and the criminals more so. If you look, there are hundreds of millions of records of people's information available for purchase at any given time on the dark web. That's not great, but that is when we rely upon companies to protect our data, and we don't take responsibility as individuals for understanding how we handle our data. So if we own our own data, it's time that we start taking responsibility for making sure that the way that we use our data is done in a secure way. So having an awareness of, hey, when I post this on social media, am I making my personal information available to the world that can be, I no longer have control of it. And also taking responsibility to make sure that wherever you're entering your data online, that you read the security controls that a particular site has, and make sure that you're taking responsibility and understanding the impacts of leaving your data behind. But there's other things such as paper-based information passing. I used the example the other day of before the pandemic, when we used to go visit each other in office buildings, sometimes when you go in and get your visitor pass, the reception areas would ask for a copy of your driver's license. Well, why would you then just hand your driver's license over to somebody just so that they scan it in? You don't know where that scanned data is going. You don't know if they're destroying that data. If they're copying your driver's license, what do they do with it afterwards? Do they destroy it? Is it shredded? How is it shredded? Is it cross-cut? Can it be put back together? Those are really big risks that I would never give my driver's license to anybody as a visitor. I would just not go in, because unless I had big assurances that my data was being properly destroyed or properly handled. And so each of us individually has to have that awareness, so that as we own our data, we can also secure our data.
Great, thank you so much, Kathy. I want to switch to Ricardo really quickly. Ricardo, if you could comment on data security in the supply chain world. Blockchain technology has many use cases in supply chain, from tracking where agricultural products are processed or grown, processed, et cetera, and delivered and distributed in retail. And also, if you could just jump in a little bit on the education question regarding cybersecurity, since you're with Georgetown, and I know we are doing our best to get as many qualified cybersecurity professionals into the market as possible. But I'd love to hear what Georgetown's up to on that as well.
The two questions are great. The first one regarding to the data. In supply chains, believe it or not, is one of the most obsolete ways of managing data. You still have a bill of lading. I don't know if you know what that is. For you transferring the property, the ownership of a product, you need to have a piece of paper, and then with the product, that piece of paper moves on. So imagine how obsolete that is. I mean, I compare that to a passport. You know, the passport is the most obsolete piece of documentation that you have. I mean, this time and age, when they can look at your iris in your eye and know who you are exactly, then why do you need to have a passport? And if you miss the passport, you lose the passport, you cannot try. Can you imagine how obsolete that is? Well, in supply chains, that is the same thing in terms of the stage of the information sharing and the requirements. So the regulation has been very, very slow. So blockchain technology has been for us like a woohoo moment, because, you know, it's what it allows us to actually leapfrog technology. So, you know, I think that one of the great advances comes when you are able to leapfrog technology. So blockchain has allowed, I mean, it's not fully implemented yet, but, you know, combining the advances in technology with all these way of covering or hedging or the cyber security the blockchain provides, then is being implemented big time by supply chains. I mean, many of the supply chains are one of the most important advocates for blockchain technology, because they are leapfrogging from that obsolete technology of the bill of lading into having all the great advantages of cyber security in supply chains. So that is regarding that. Regarding the education in the business school, I agree with all the things I've said. Nobody has brought that up, like, you know, should be a required topic in business school curriculum. You know, it's not. And, you know, I mean, there's a disconnect. I mean, I am a very cynical about business schools, because business schools, you know, you have a bunch of professors that, you know, they're very smart, very intelligent, they write all kinds of papers, but at the end of the day, they are not actually doing the business. The business is being done by people like you. You know, you're basically managing companies and managing stuff. We are thinking and creating frameworks. So where is the connection? So at Georgetown, we created something that's called the Global Business Initiative, where we bring companies, CEOs of companies, and they tell us what their issues are. And one of the issues had been cybersecurity. So the main question is what you are asking. Hey, do you cover cybersecurity in your curriculum? I mean, is that a required class? People say, yeah, it's very important. But, you know, teaching that is by no means trivial. You know, how do you go about conceptualizing the issue? So we should hire Kathy immediately to come to Georgetown and start teaching the class. And I will help you after 32 years at Georgetown. I'll make it a required class. So Kathy, if you ever get bored of what you do, I'll get you teaching at Georgetown like this.
Excellent.
That's great.
Thank you.
It's not too far. So, because Kathy's.
Yeah, right.
Drive over the bridge.
Yeah. So question, overarching question for the three panelists. So what is something unexpected and positive that has occurred in your industry that we haven't talked about yet? Or something that's in the works as a result of adapting to the pandemic? I know, well, Rajiv, why don't you take that one?
Yeah,
so why don't you kick us off?
I think probably what I'm going to say is obvious to everybody, and it's really the adoption, mass adoption of telemedicine, right? I don't know if any of you have had a telemedicine visit, you know, during COVID, and if you have, did you have one ever before COVID? But once these shelter-in-place orders were put and issued broadly in March, the federal government very quickly relaxed rules around telehealth services, so that doctors could practice cross-state borders. So that we could sort of reallocate resources, and you could actually get to talk to a doctor in another state when you needed it. And that included millions of Medicare patients, which is fabulous. And they also increased reimbursement rates, because historically doctors weren't paid the same for a telemedicine visit, so they had no incentive to do it. And so there's sort of parity there now. Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts reported that the number of telehealth visits they had in their network in February of this year was 200, and in May it was 38,000. So it gives you a sense of just the growth. And nationally, it grew 4,000%, over 4,000% from March of 2019 to March 2020, and it's continued to grow since March. So I think it's huge, and it's so exciting because it will reduce disparities in healthcare. It will make healthcare more accessible. It'll allow doctors to see patients everywhere. And frankly, it'll save people time and money. You know, how frustrating is it to get a doctor's appointment and you have to leave work and, you know, figure out what to do with your kids, and now you can just sort of log on. And they've even allowed doctors to do these visits, not just through the traditional platform. And, you know, Kathy will probably be, you know, uneasy about this, but you can do it through WhatsApp and FaceTime, you know, and doctors are, you know, any way possible communicating with their patients. And on one hand, it's a positive obviously there's cybersecurity concerns with all of that. I hope we don't lose momentum there. I hope it's here to stay. And I think it's also really a way that we can kind of streamline the entire healthcare system and make it much more efficient cost. So
Great. Yes. Before we move on to Kathy for the same question, Rajiv, I have a follow-up question. You are an active angel investor. You've been in the investment community for quite some time. What have you seen in that sort of capital formation sector, especially in the early stage side for tech companies in terms of raising money and valuations and that kind of thing? Can you make a comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, valuations are at an all-time high. The amount of money flowing into digital health is at an all-time high. Specifically on that telemedicine point, there's a ton of companies coming out that are really creating online digital clinics. Companies like, especially in the mental health space, I talked earlier about this, but mental health is so prevalent, and COVID-19 has just exacerbated it. And I think what's great about it is that now that we're talking about it openly, and most people sort of get why anxiety and depression and so forth are on the rise, the stigma is going away. And there's a ton of new capabilities. So there's platforms like Ahead, which is an online clinic for depression and anxiety, and they'll prescribe medication and deliver it right to your home. There's platforms like Talkspace, which I'm sure you've seen the ads with Michael Phelps for online therapy and telebehavioral health. So I think that's just a real positive, and there's a lot of innovation. I've also seen some new telemedicine companies that are targeting underserved populations, so LGBTQ populations, Black, Indigenous, people of color populations. So people that may not have felt like they could find a physician that understood who they were or understood their specific needs and issues can now go online and actually connect directly to a physician that they may identify more with. But I think there's some really, really exciting happenings in the digital health space around telemedicine.
Thank you for that. Kathy, any new and unexpected positive developments in the cyberspace? I know it's pervasive, it's ubiquitous, it affects every company.
Yeah. So I think what everybody working from home has, in what Rajiv was saying, in the availability now of telehealth is the relaxing of the regulations and the restrictions that were in place before that prevented the propagation of making medical services available to people globally. I think that this situation has allowed those requirements to relax a little bit from a cyber perspective and make the tools available. However, Rajiv, don't worry on the WhatsApp. That's encrypted, all
Okay.
good.
There you go.
The other thing is it has helped make people more aware of the security issues, and it has also forced business owners to start taking accountability for securing their products. I think a lot of us heard the news about Zoom and the security issues that they were having that were very, very serious. And that forced the company to take a stance on being a secured collaboration firm, a virtual collaboration platform. And that's a good thing. And so as we start turning our businesses more online like this, positive changes are happening because it has to.
Thank you. Ricardo.
In the supply chain, there are three things that had been not really that surprising, but they have been shown change. Number one is the fact that technology is being used more than before. It was something that was coming, but that has been accelerated. The second one that you are all responsible for is online shopping. Online shopping has been a significant increase. We knew that was going to come, but we never expected that fast. Companies are shifting their thinking. I mean, from having like a 10 to 15% of their total revenue coming out of online, now it's 30, 40, and up to 50%. So how is that going to change your business? And the third one, which is the most pleasant surprise, is companies have been able to show that all the systems that they have in place for absorbing the potential damage that something like this could generate have been working. It's like you having in your house, the fire extinguisher, and then it's there, and then you never have to use it. But then when the fire comes and you use the fire extinguisher and say, oh, wow, these things really work, and it really was able to eliminate the fire. Well, many companies, I mean, many of the companies we're talking to, they are very, very surprised that the fire extinguisher really worked, and they were able to just placate the fire very fast and keep running.
Great, thank you. And I'd like to remind the audience to please submit your questions into the chat box, and Chris or I will read those out, and you can indicate if you'd like a specific panelist to answer the question. How about advice? So question for the three of you. If you had to give a piece of advice in dealing with the changes, I know we're sort of in our 6th stage of grief here with acceptance now, and I think we're in it for the long haul, right? Google yesterday said that employees don't have to come back to work until summer of next year. That's 12 months from now. You know, Ricardo and Rajiv and Kathy, starting with Ricardo, what one piece of either business or personal advice can the audience take away to help us?
Okay, I think that we need to shift away from getting degrees and going to universities just to get a degree. Start emphasizing your qualifications. What are you good at? We need to start moving away. I mean, society has been pushing for too long the fact that you need to be like, the first thing that you put in your CV is, I have an undergrad in this, and I have a master's in this, and I have a PhD in that. Man, don't shock me so much with your degrees. Why don't you tell me what are you good at? I would like to, even if you never finish school, why don't you tell me what your qualifications are? I think that universities are making a mistake, treating all students as customers rather than treating them as products. Universities should be emphasizing that your products, that you need to have a certain level of qualifications. So when you're trying to get a job, you can tell to your employer, hey, I'm good at this and this and this and that, more than they're just saying, I have this degree and that degree. Using the degree as a proxy for what you know is obsolete, passé. It doesn't work anymore. So I would, my suggestion will be, tell me if you can give me the 3 bullet points of what your qualifications are, more than what your degrees are. And those qualifications can be from, I can juggle with 5 balls, that will tell me a lot about you, to how many languages you speak, so how are your interpersonal relationships. I learn more of you than if you tell me I have a degree in this or a degree in that.
Got it. Thank you for that. And by the way, that answers one of the audience questions, which was, should I take a certification or get a degree? And I think Ricardo, the 30x year professor at Georgetown, is telling you to build your skills. Rajiv.
You know, I think my recommendation would be sort of health and personal recommendation, which is to learn how to meditate and practice mindfulness. You know, these are really challenging times, and the only constant is change. And by adopting mindfulness in your life and learning how to meditate, you'll become a more resilient person. There's a fellow by the name of Dr. John Kabat-Zinn, and he is the father of what's called mindfulness-based stress reduction. And he has this quote that I love. The quote is, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn how to surf. And being more mindful and meditating is a way to surf these waves that we know that have already come and that will keep coming at us. And digital health makes it so much easier for us to do this. I mean, there are apps that you've heard of like Calm and Headspace and Waking Up. You know, get one of those apps, do it for 10 minutes a day. It'll change your life. It'll change your personal life, your professional life. It'll change your health, your outlook, and it will make you somebody who thrives during COVID-19 as opposed to somebody who breaks during COVID-19. And I think you want to be in that former category.
Thank you for that. That's a wonderful piece of advice. I've meditated every day for the last 10 years, and I can tell you it has saved my life. So thank you for that, Rajiv. Kathy?
Yes, so I'm going to jump on to the fire extinguisher example. And when you look at your home, so this is a personal piece of advice that's actually going to help contribute to corporate security. So when you look at your home, look at all the various different controls that you have to keep people out of your stuff, keep people out of your yard, out of your house. So let's think of a neighborhood. If you live in a gated neighborhood, that is one piece of security control that the neighborhood has put in place. Now we get to your house. You would never leave your house with the door unlocked. As a matter of fact, think of it, you would never have a house without a door, right? So you want to have that initial barrier in place, and then you want to be able to lock it. And then when you come inside, you want to have fire alarms so that if you're asleep and a fire breaks out, then you're alerted to the fact that there's something bad going on so that you can get your family out safely. You want to have that fire extinguisher easily accessible to you so that you can put out that fire. And you want to have a dog in the house, for example, that will bark when an intruder is coming. You want to have that peephole in the door so you can see who's on the other side. So if you think of all of those things that you do to secure yourself physically in your home, you can do the very same thing to your online experience. So make sure that you're using some sort of antivirus or anti-malware to keep that bad guy off of your computer. Make sure that when you are surfing the web, you are using some sort of internet security or a VPN so that you aren't introducing hackers' ability to gain access to your computer through those avenues. You think of your computer as another physical asset that you own that you can secure, and it'll help you, help your family. And ultimately, when you learn how to do that, you will take those practices into your employer and help the businesses be more secure as well.
Thank you so much, Kathy. We have about 10 minutes left, and Chris has a bunch of questions from the audience. So maybe we can go into sort of a rapid fire Q&A, Chris?
Yeah, we do. Let's start with just the broad topic of online shopping, because we have a lot of these questions. I'm going to try to combine them here. So a three-part question. One, is this trend of online shopping that's obviously accelerated during COVID, is it here to stay, and are brick and mortar stores doomed? And two, what can people do to make sure that they're keeping all of their data safe while they're going down this road? And that's both from a personal shopping and from a doing business over the internet as well.
Okay, let me deal with the one on the brick and mortar. No, I mean, what is changing the model? So you're going to be having a hybrid. The brick and mortar serves as a service facility where you can return products. It also serves in supply chain as inventory hubs. So it's always there, and it's the best way of touching the customer. I mean, why do you have a Nike store anywhere if you can get all of those products somewhere? Because Nike needs to get in touch with, needs to see you, needs to see what are the different customers wanting and doing. So I believe that the trend is going to be a hybrid. What is changing is the composition of revenues. I mean, how many revenues are going to come from brick and mortar, and how many of the revenues are going to be coming from online? The model that is changing significantly is the shopping mall. Shopping mall is changing. It's going to be for browsing more than anything else. I mean, most people go to a shopping mall to see the product, touch it, play with it, and then order it online. And most probably from another location as something that is cheaper. So all that is changing. You know, the most difficult thing to change in the world is consumer behavior. So one of the things that we're witnessing right now, because of all these things that have been accelerated through the pandemic, is another inflection point in the consumer behavior, moving even more into the online shopping that started already with the internet, but now it's becoming more accelerated. But I don't think, this is my personal opinion, I don't think that the brick and mortar are doomed. I think that it's just like, part of the hybrid model that is going to be winning in this environment.
Right.
So on to the cyber element of that. So a lot of people don't realize that when you go out and you create an account online and you have your username and your password, if that gets compromised, there are programs that hackers use to go and test those credentials on everywhere else you might go. So passwords, right? It is most likely in consumer behavior that if you use one password on one site, you're going to use it on everywhere you go. So it's very, very simple once I get your password to go in and access everything you've got online. So tip, don't use the same password everywhere in every single place you go. If you can't remember them all, God forbid, don't write them down and put them on a sticky note. That is, the wrong way. But there's applications like LastPass that can manage your passwords in an encrypted way so that you don't have to remember every single one of them. But please, please, please don't use the same password everywhere you go. So that is one way when shopping online, you can protect yourself.
Thanks, guys. Rajiv, we're going to flip straight to you and ask for a little, maybe 100 seconds on this. Let's talk telemedicine. Is the pandemic going to digitize the health sector faster? And what do you think about a lot of these healthcare companies that are are switching over and investing in tools that are assisting people to virtually visit their doctor?
Yeah, I mean, so we've talked a lot about telemedicine. It's here to stay. It's transforming healthcare. I'll double click on kind of a specific kind of element within digital health and digital treatment, which is what's called digital therapeutics. If you haven't heard this term, you'll be hearing it a lot. There's a digital therapeutic company called Livongo Health, which went public very recently, and they now have a $10 billion market cap. And basically what these companies are doing, Livongo is a diabetes management company. They're taking what was traditionally offline, kind of human intensive kind of workflows, and then putting them all online and making them digital. So for example, if you have diabetes, you can be prescribed Livongo, or you can voluntarily subscribe to Livongo. They will send you a continuous glucose monitor in the mail and the test strips, and then they will give you human coaching and then digital kind of AI-driven coaching. You'll track your weight, you'll track your physical activity, so forth, and you never really need to go see a doctor in person, or certainly you don't need to do it as often as you used to do. And the outcomes are equivalent, if not better, than what you would get from a doctor in person. And so there are a lot of different companies now replicating that digital therapeutic model. There's companies like Hinge, which does musculoskeletal health. So if you have any type of osteoarthritis or other types of musculoskeletal issues, you can get digital treatment through Hinge. There's Sleepio if you have insomnia or other types of sleep issues. There's Silver Cloud for anxiety and depression. There's just a ton of these new capabilities in this digital therapeutics umbrella. And I think it's really just wonderful. We can scale them around the world. We get better outcomes. They're cost effective. People can access them, and they save a lot of time and money. And I think they're here to stay. And we know that because insurance companies will now cover them. So they're covered services, billed as a medical claim and covered by either your employer or by your health plan. So I think that's really the biggest trend right now in digital health is digital therapeutics.
Great. And just one more question that applies, I think, to all three of you as we approach 6:30. You have a lot of young professionals in attendance right now. What can they be doing to convince their C-suite leaders that things like cybersecurity and investing in technology and thinking about all of this, what can they do to convince them that this matters? You know, there's still a gap at a lot of businesses, and people are falling prey to plenty of cybersecurity issues. So what can somebody do if they're rising through the ranks at their company to really make this a point to drive home?
I'll give them Kathy's phone number and email and explain
Yes, please
immediately
tell
what
me.
the issue is. So Kathy, you will be the first referral I will send them to. Then I will send them to Rajiv so he can explain the health implications of not doing it properly, because this needs to be done. But the bottom line is, I mean, this is a no-brainer. They need to do it. I mean, the data is out there. And then I would seriously call Kathy. Kathy, give me like 3 bullets on what are the big numbers, and then I can go around and then, just take it from there, because I think this is a no-brainer for many people. And then definitely we should do it.
Yes, I mean, employees rising up through the rank, we all have a responsibility to make our leaders aware of threats and risks that they may not know of. So continually being educated and showing the value to your employer by helping them understand those impacts and raising the issues to them, sharing things that are in the news that they may not know that's going on, and helping them understand the risk. I think the younger generation who has grown up online is really the best generation to help educate those of us who didn't grow up with computers in our homes or social media on our phones. So becoming more educated, helping educate those above you and throughout the upper leadership chain is the best thing that you can do. And as a matter of fact, it'll establish you as somebody that they go to and rely on for information pertaining to cyber.
And I don't have much more to add to that, but I will say that one thing I've always found to be effective is, Google your competitors, find examples of where they've stumbled and had breaches, and print those articles out and show them to your leadership and say, do we want this to be us? And you'd be surprised how quickly people act and learn from others' mistakes.
Terrific. This has been, we're at 6:30 now. We do want to respect everybody's time. I know that a couple of our panelists do have a hard stop, and we can stay on, and Dave and Jason can moderate a further discussion, but let's give it up for, how do you clap on a Zoom call? Can we clap or something?
Clap for each other, yeah.
I thought you guys were great,
clap.
and it was a joy to work with you guys, and I loved, I learned quite a bit. So I'll turn it back over to Jason. And once again, on behalf of the panel, thank you guys so much for having us, and hope you guys got something out of this.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, it was an absolute privilege. I think it's fair to say our first virtual panel went off as a major success. Thanks in part to all of you, Tien, Ricardo, Kathy, Rajiv, again, for your time and your busy schedules. We're beyond grateful. To our audience and community, thank you for the time today. I think Rajiv summed it up pretty well. You can't stop the waves, but you can learn how to surf. I really like that. I'll probably put that and keep that on my office here. And another thing that stood out to me, Kathy, that you brought up, and we put this all over Twitter, 3 million open cybersecurity positions today because we just don't have the talent. I mean, that's a mind-blowing statistic, right? And I think your perspectives have really opened up and got a lot of people on this call, and subsequently, because we've recorded this, we'll be sharing this to our community. Hopefully it's going to stimulate a lot of continued discussion and conversation and follow-ups, because we will, for everybody that's in attendance, and we'll see this, we'll be sharing with all of you contact information for our panelists and moderators should you wish to further engage, and we will aggregate. We have a bunch of questions I see here that we weren't able to get to. We will aggregate those, and we will do our best to answer and address them accordingly. And Kathy, I also got a note thing on here. One of the leaders of LastPass is on this call out of San Francisco. So he said, thank you for the shout out.
No problem.
Great work to the panelists. Thanks for the time. I want to just say, before I turn this over to Dave, to spend a little bit more time to address questions that might come up about FountainHead Rhode Island, our organization. I want to thank our sponsors again, Insperity and the Daily Note. And I also want to put out a very quick teaser to our next panel session. It's scheduled on the 21st of September to begin at 5:30 Eastern. As of now, it's as it was planned in June. It's the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion panel. We had originally planned to do it in person at the Guild Tap Room in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. I'm sure many of you on the call are familiar with that, so stay tuned. If you want to, it's live now for registration on Eventbrite, and we'll be posting information and further details over the coming weeks on that live event. And as Dave said earlier, we encourage you to follow us on Twitter at FountainHead RI, on LinkedIn, our LinkedIn page, and of course, Facebook, where this was live streamed. So with that, Dave, I'll turn it back over to you. If any closing comments, and then invite questions from those remaining about FountainHead Rhode Island. Thanks again.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, everyone. And Rajiv, I know you have to go, and if any of the other panelists have to go too.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Feel free to just
Appreciate it.
Of course. No, I echo all of Jason's comments. I mean, it's very timely. It's funny. I was actually texting Jason during the panel, and I can't believe only 3 short years, maybe 3.5 years ago, we started this organization, and now we're almost 1,000 people, and we're holding live panel events from people all over the country. So it's just amazing to see how we're growing. And one thing I just did want to touch on, the sponsors that we have. All of our events are free, which is really a big kudos to the sponsors. Everything's covered by corporate sponsorships. Without them, we wouldn't be able to do what we do and keep these things free to people all over the country. Obviously, we have a lot of live events, usually pre-COVID. So we do want to thank those sponsors that have been with us from the very beginning, people that have been with us throughout this year. Insperity and the Daily Note have been 2 good partners of ours for this entire year. And just thank you so much. Jason, are there any questions in the queue? And for those listening, we can open this up, whether it's about technology or if you have FountainHead related questions. Jason and I are happy to answer any of those as well.
Yeah, so Dave, I'll say this, there's still a bunch of questions. Obviously, there's no shortage of cybersecurity questions. I see Kathy is still hanging on the line. And of course, there's a bunch on healthcare and a handful on supply chain. What we could do, if you want, Dave and Kathy, if you are willing to stick around a little longer, we can address a few more of those questions, and then we can follow up individually and then post answers across our social media channels for the other questions. So Dave, if you want to do that, plus if any questions come up in the meantime around FountainHead, we could certainly to continue to entertain those for the group, if that's okay. So Kathy, are you all right?
That works.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. So if I look at a couple of questions that came in, and I want to make sure also I don't duplicate some of the ones that Tian said, but this one I don't think was addressed. What are some of the trends, Kathy, that you're seeing when you look at public company boards and accountability as it relates to cybersecurity protection? How are board directors in general reacting to this ever-evolving risk relating to cybersecurity?
So we would like to say that they are getting educated and doing the right things, but it just isn't there yet. So we really aren't doing a good job as board members of taking accountability for the security of the companies. So I would say we have so much to do to help board members understand cybersecurity. I would venture to guess that most boards can't even spell cybersecurity. I think it's at that basic of a level. But nothing happens in a company substantially without the board or the executive leadership team sanctioning or sponsoring the effort. So if you see a company that's getting breached and hasn't done their due diligence on creating a program that's securing the customers and the infrastructure, it's likely due to the fact that the senior executives and the boards will not invest in doing what they need, invest the money, the time, the resources to build a proper security infrastructure. So I think we're eons away from being where we need to be.
Yeah, that's awesome, Kathy. One other question that we had is, what should companies be thinking about when determining where to back up servers? I know we talked about, obviously you want diversity, you want things not to be located in the same space, right? You want to be diverse in the way that you actually handle those servers and where they back them up, and not only back them up, but actually test the backups that you actually have. So when something bad does happen, you're not trying to figure it out and restore it from the very first time. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think ransomware has taught us all about backups and testing our backups. So, it really does boil down to what industry are you in, and whether or not there are regulatory requirements for how you store your data, where you store your data, how you control that data, whether it's encrypted, how many miles from the main source organization does that backup need to be, whether you do it with a third party. There's so many various different things that go into that, but number one, you better be backing up your data, even the laptops and hard drives of PCs of the employees, and you have to be testing those backups. Because if you do fall victim of a ransomware or some sort of data destruction type of effort from malicious intent, you've got to be able to bring it back. I am not an advocate at all of paying ransom. If you pay ransom, you are paying a bad guy. This is not some robot performing these illegal acts. These are human beings behind the technology who are executing these attacks on people. And when you pay ransom, you are paying those people to go out and commit that crime to somebody else, on somebody else. So I'm not an advocate of that. I'm an advocate of doing the proper things to secure the company to begin with, and investing in that. And one of the basic things that you can do is back up that data, test it. And because if you don't have the controls in place yet and you do fall victim, that's a very good way of getting back online and getting your business functioning again.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome insight. And we'll just touch on one more and then we can let everyone go. We really appreciate everyone's time. One of the users had wrote in here, I've been in the manufacturing field for over 15 years and have decided to jump into the cybersecurity field. Is this something you see often? And it's one of the things I think Rajiv and a lot of the other people about reinventing yourself and making sure that you do the best possible job that you can to protect yourself in an environment. COVID probably is forcing a lot of people to go back to the whiteboard. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think security gets a bad rap when it comes to stereotyping the people who are in the field. So everybody seems to think that cybersecurity is all IT. I had to grow up in the technical field. I got to know the binary code. I got to know this, I had to be a technologist in order to get into cyber. That's not the case. there are lots and lots of roles that someone can do coming over from various different fields. I did a report, and I'm happy to share it with anyone, while I was at Cybrary about where do people come from? What other fields do they come from when entering into cyber? Because cyber wasn't always around, right? So they came from somewhere. We see a lot of people coming in from marketing roles. We see a lot of people coming in from finance roles. I don't know what position in the manufacturing field that you were in, but certainly coming in from manufacturing industries makes sense. But yeah, you can do governance, risk, compliance, policies, procedures. You don't have to be a technician to know how to do those things. So I hope we can change the reputation, the bad reputation that we get that you have to be a tech guru in order to enter the field.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us today and for all the awesome questions. This will be recorded, so you can go online on our social media accounts and watch it again. Big thank you to Ricardo, Kathy, Rajiv, and TN. Just huge thank you for taking the time, the opportunity. We will send out their contact information after this if we can. And then we'll collect all these questions and we'll do our best to kind of get responses back out too. But thank you everyone so much for joining. Thank you to our sponsors and our panelists. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Have a good day.